Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. Creation stories from around the world show a remarkable similarity in their myths about how we and our earth came into being. Before I share with you some really interesting stories, I'd like to introduce you to a series of symbols found in an ancient manuscript that Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, describes in her major work, The Secret Doctrine. The manuscript was made of black palm leaf pages with white symbols, which will serve as an outline for what I will be sharing with you today. The first page is a white circle on a black background, and it represents a unity from which we all proceed and return. Blavatsky, referring to the white circle, wrote about Pascal, quoting Hermes Trismegistus, God is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. This state is written about in Genesis, in the Bible, as darkness was upon the face of the deep. And you'll see this reference to the darkness is very common. The ancient verses that Blavatsky wrote about in The Secret Doctrine, the Stanzas of Dzyan, refers to it as the darkness that breathes over the slumbering waters of life. Now, waters will also be very common, as well as the breathing that is mentioned here. And there's no manifestation at this point. Egyptian mythology has a pair of gods that represent this, Kuk and Kauket, the god and goddess of darkness. This darkness has also been called chaos, the abyss, the great deep, nothingness, and the primeval waters. These primordial waters are represented by the Egyptian god Nun, who lifts the ship of the sun god Ra at the moment of creation. And you can see the picture of the god Nun with his arms holding up the ship of manifestation. In the Bible, there is a corresponding verse in Genesis, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Now, there are many more quotes that I could include here, but not to have my talk be too lengthy. I only selected a few to show you how common these metaphors are for the beginning of creation. The second page of Blavatsky's manuscript shows the same circle with the point in the center. And this is the start of manifestation and is commonly referred to as the light. In Genesis, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. From Zarathushtra, the author of the holy book of the Zoroastrians, he, Mazda, or God, first created by means of his own light. The third page of the manuscript has a center point extending to a diameter drawn horizontally, and this is a divine feminine. And added to this is the vertical diameter, the divine masculine, making a cross in the circle. This represents a duality in life. The picture on the right creatively depicts the duality with the sun and the moon placed where the little dots would be on the yin-yang symbol. This duality, symbolized by the male and female with light and darkness, is needed for manifestation. So just having light or darkness alone would be homogeneous. So things start with nothingness, with darkness in pralaya. Then when we have creation, we need both light and we need to keep the dark to make distinctions of form. Both are necessary, for light makes shadows and allows contrast for life to be fully experienced. This is illustrated in China's Book of the Yellow Emperor, using the metaphors of the mysterious female or the valley, which contains the valley spirit the masculine. So this makes the duality. The valley is hollow and limitless so that it can embrace and nourish spirit. Its origin is from the not born that gives birth to everything. Spirit continues forever and cannot be used up. So this spirit is Blavatsky's one life. The 5th page of the manuscript is where the circle disappears as it marks the beginning of life on the physical plane. The Chinese valley that is female, that nourishes the valley spirit, represents earth. And many creation stories have manifestation starting with earth or clay. So we see this in the Bible. God makes the heavens and the earth, then makes man out of dust from the ground. Then he breathes the breath of life into his nostrils. To illustrate how aligned the earth is within a human being, the earth is made of 5 major components, and you will see that they're all in the human body. The first is water, and we know that the body is over half water and more than that in some organs. The second is minerals such as iron, calcium, and magnesium, all in the human body. The third component is organic matter, such as decayed leaves, which were once alive. And the human body is alive and organic with its carbon atom as its basis. The fourth component of earth is that it contains organisms. In soil, it might be worms, and in a human being, we have bacteria and other microbes in our digestive tract, as well as other places. Lastly, the earth and the human are made of gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane gas. The Earth's crust is made of the elements that you see in the pie chart: oxygen, silicon, aluminum, iron, calcium, sodium, and magnesium. And they're all in the human body, as well as shown in the periodic table here, which has the percent composition of all the elements of the body. And they're highlighted in color. And you can see how many there are. I've placed a star over those which were in the previous pie chart, and I listed them on the left, the major elements of the Earth's crust. So you can see we are really made of earth. Also, the very word human comes from humus, meaning earth. Compost breaks down and eventually makes humus. In the ancient Mexican manuscript, the Popol Vuh, man is created out of mud or clay taken from underneath the waters. The picture on the right is an artist's depiction of making a human being, and the picture on the lower left is from the manuscript. And the faces at the top left are from archaeological ruins. In the Islamic Quran, the Lord said to the angels, "I'm going to create a man of clay from smooth mud and breathe into him his soul." The Pima Native Americans tell of man-maker, the magician, making human beings out of earth and letting them cook in the sun. But Coyote keeps interfering by giving bad advice about how long to leave them out. They come out either too light or too dark. When man-maker stops listening to Coyote, the people come out the beautiful color of the Pueblo Native Americans. Many creation stories use the metaphor of a cosmic egg to begin manifestation. This is the white circle with the dot in the center. This slide is the Egyptian cosmic egg bringing forth the sun god Ra, and he had the head of a falcon with the sun disk inside a cobra on his head. The Egyptian god of chaos, He, also has an egg on his head. The cosmic egg has many creation stories and is hatched from a cosmic bird like a swan or a goose, possibly because they're seen as big enough to begin manifestation. This is illustrated by the Hindu mysterious bird, the swan, Kalahamsa, who comes from chaos and who gives birth to the golden egg, the Brahmanda, which opens for Brahma, the creator god, for him to make the heavens and the earth. The picture on the left is a tile of the Hamsa bird with a flowery tail, and the picture on the right illustrates Brahma on the swan, Kalahamsa, with Brahma having 4 faces denoting the 4 elements and the 4 cardinal points of direction for our earth. And we'll get to this story later. The Greek Nix is also another bird of creation and is painted on pottery in the pictures, and they're in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the horses represent the 4 elements as well as some other things, and their creation stories are very involved. An interesting twist on this is the Australian Aboriginal story that says that at first there are only animals. One day, an emu and a crane fight, and in anger, the crane snatches the emu's enormous egg out of the nest and hurls it into the sky. It bursts open, and the yolk forms a great fire, which becomes the sun. And these pictures are various artists' depiction of the story theme. In the poem of creation from Finland called the Kalevala, meaning the creation of heaven and earth, a golden-eyed duck builds a nest, and she lays 6 golden eggs with the 7th one of iron. They tumble into the sea and crack open. The lower half of one egg becomes the earth, and the egg yolk makes the sun, and the egg white gleams palely as the moon. The 7th egg of iron gives rise to the world, with iron symbolic of density, of the density of the physical plane, as well as the iron in the blood of humans and most creatures. Iron can also represent the difficulties that we can have in life that bog us down and make life heavy, like iron or mud. The mythology of Japan says that everything originated from an ocean of mud and water. From the mud, a god is created that from a seed that grows into a plant that gets so tall that it reaches the clouds in heaven. This god is lonely. I'm going to show that tree a little better. This god is lonely. So he creates more gods, including Izanagi and Izanami, male and female. And so you can see the duality again here. One day they become curious about what is beneath the ocean of mud. So Izanagi takes his staff and jabs it into the ocean. When he picks it back up again, the lumps of earth that fall into the water become the islands of Japan. These next couple stories illustrate the start of creation of a human being. The Naga tribe of the Himalayas has the first man being created, who then becomes lonely and asks God for a companion. God tries to make a woman out of the earth, but he isn't satisfied with it, and he calls it a tiger. The next attempt still isn't good, and God calls this one an elephant. He creates all the animals of the earth this way. After trying so hard to make a woman, God grows tired and sits by a pond to rest. Seeing his reflection in the water, he touches it, and instantly he makes woman. Man and woman fall in love right away and continue with the creation of humanity. A similar story is from Africa that says long ago, two spirit people were sneezed out of the mouth of their creator. The woman, Ayadola, became lonely and decided to make more babies or more people for the earth. And she built a great fire and baked up batches of clay babies, with each one having its own shade of color. And these made up the races of the people on earth. These two stories that I just shared, where the God touches the water to create a woman, along with the creator who sneezes out the first human, exemplifies Blavatsky's esoteric description of the first root race, her term for the first wave of humanity, called the self-born. And they come from celestial beings called Dhyani Chohans, or members of the angelic hierarchy, through the use of their will. And we're told that they threw off or projected their shadows or astral bodies to make the spiritual form for humanity. They exuded these forms, which were very ethereal and spiritual. To describe the way this took place, HPB similarized it to what occurred with mediums at a seance. When Blavatsky wrote her book in 1888, spiritualism was very popular, and people were going to mediums to try to make contact with a relative who had died. Blavatsky observed these and said that materialized forms sometimes oozed out of the bodies of certain mediums that usually just vanished, but could be made more solid. The picture on the left depicts the etheric body of the human, which is the substance that Blavatsky observed and which makes the first root race. And this isn't a race at all like we know it today, but it's just Blavatsky's term for that level of that first level of the creation of humanity. This division from the Dhyani Chohans, or the angels, is similar to fission, one making two, or of how the single-celled organism, the amoeba, makes a second amoeba. Other creation stories follow a similar theme. One is the Hindu story that Blavatsky makes reference to in the Secret Doctrine of Samya, the wife of Surya, the Hindu sun god and creator of the universe. The story goes that Samya was unable to endure the fervors of her lord, or another version said that she grew tired of his brilliant light, so she retired to the jungle to perform religious devotions or tapas. She left for her husband, her handmaiden, her etheric double, and this is the first root race, and Surya, the sun, thought this was his wife. Then the sun and the etheric double, the handmaid, go on to have many children to create humanity. Another story with a similar theme tells of the Egyptian creator god Atum, or Amun, who spits out Shu and Tefnu from his mouth. The first human being in the Christian and Jewish tradition is Adam. And the word Adam means without blood, with A meaning without and Dam meaning blood. And this represents that there are no physical means to create the human at this stage because it is still very spiritual and ethereal. Proceeding onward with manifestation, Blavatsky teaches us that the second root race, or wave of humanity, develops from the first in a manner of procreation called budding or sweat-born, because it comes directly from the original. Sea anemones have offspring in this way, and you can see the larger parent anemones with their offspring growing on them, who will eventually separate and grow on their own. And this is illustrated in the Bible with Eve being created from Adam's rib. Another similar story from Hinduism is that of Kandu, an eminent sage. Because of his stature, Kandu awakened the jealousy of the other gods. So Indra, the king of the gods, sent one of his female nymphs to tempt him. Her name was Pramloka, and she seduced Kandu. When Kandu awakened from his infatuation, he became flustered and angry, which scared Pramloka so that she flew away. As she left, she brushed up against the leaves of the trees she passed, and the perspiration from her body came off onto the leaves. All of the drops of perspiration created her child, Marisha, the sweat-born. And that's the second root race or wave of humanity. And Marisha goes on to have other children who people the earth. Another similar creation story is from Madagascar off Africa, where the first man lived without eating, then indulged himself so much that his legs swelled up and burst, creating a female who was the mother of the race. So interestingly enough, the same legend is told by the Amazon's Yanomami tribe in South America's Amazon. And the previous stories were from South Africa and India. And the correspondence, I feel, is just amazing. A further example of the second wave of humanity from the Greeks depicts Zeus, the son of Kronos, who arranges to have siblings created by slipping a potion into his father's drink, whereby Kronos vomits up Zeus's brothers and sisters. As manifestation proceeds, the start of duality is represented by the combination of the divine feminine and the divine masculine in the hermaphrodite or royal androgyne, a level of manifestation where there is not yet the development of gender. It is only in potential. Blavatsky defines this as the third root race or wave of humanity. The royal androgyne is also illustrated in the Greek myth of Hermaphroditus. The statue shows the female Samacis pursuing Hermaphroditus, who is the son of the Greek god Hermes and the goddess of love, Aphrodite. And these pictures show different angles of the same statue. The story takes place where a spring flows into a beautiful fountain over which the lovely nymph Samacis presides. A handsome youth, Hermaphroditus, comes to the fountain and is surprised to find it quenches his thirst. As he lays in the cool water, he feels the refreshing quality on his limbs. Because of this, he comes to the fountain daily, which delights the nymph, who falls in love with the youth so completely that she pleads with the gods to permit her to be joined permanently to her lover. The gods accept her request, and Hermaphroditus comes forth as half man and half woman. And so you can see the marble statue on the left and the fresco show him as having both genders. This marks Blavatsky's third race, root race, or wave of humanity and its body type. In India, the deity of Ardhanarishvara is half man and half woman, composed of Shiva and Parvati split down the middle. And the red skirt shows Parvati, the female, who is Shiva's consort. And Shiva is one of the Hindu trinity of high gods, including Vishnu and Brahma. The next story is from the Iroquois Native Americans and has many versions that were developed in neighboring geographical areas, but the basic theme remains the same. And this story has quite a depiction of duality, and I'll be sharing the entire story. In the beginning, there was only a great blue. Sky people lived happily and quietly on an island floating in the sky, and there was no death or sadness. One day, one of the sky women realizes she's going to give birth to twins, and she tells her husband, who flies into a rage and takes her to the center of an island where a tree gives out light to all. The man tears up the tree, creating a huge hole in the middle of the island. Curious, the woman peers through. Far below, she sees the waters covering the earth. At that moment, her husband pushes her through the hole, and she falls toward the waters below. As Sky Woman falls, two birds see her and catch her on their backs and bring her to the other sea animals. All are determined to help. They dive into the water and bring up mud from the bottom of the sea and spread it on the back of Big Turtle. The mud begins to grow until it becomes the size of North America. When Sky Woman steps onto the land, she sprinkles dust into the air and creates the stars, the moon, and the sun. Soon she gives birth to twin sons, Sapling and Flint, who are opposites. And so you can hear the duality once again. One child is born the normal way, and the second breaks out of her side so that she dies. So this is just like Eve from Adam's rib. Also, the Sky Woman's dying symbolizes the end of that level of manifestation as life proceeds to deeper physicality. And you'll see this dying is very common. The story says that when the divine woman is buried, all the plants of the earth grow from her body. So this depiction is also represented in other stories around the world. Sapling grows up to be kind and gentle, but Flint has a heart as cold as his name. So the duality with its opposites are shown here. They begin to fill the earth with their creation. What Sapling creates is good. He makes animals that are useful to human, like the horse, and he makes rivers that flow in two directions. And into these he puts fish without bones. And he makes plants that people can easily eat. But Flint comes along and destroys Sapling's work. He creates suffering and all that is bad. He puts bones into fish and creates winter, but Sapling brings back life in spring. Flint creates monsters that his brother drives beneath the earth. Eventually, Sapling and Flint decide they cannot share the earth. They battle, and the bad brother Flint dies. Before Flint dies, he says he will go to the far west, and all races of man will follow him there when they die. And you may say this is similar to Theosophy's The Astral Plane. A parallel story comes from the Tahitian and Samoan creator Ta Aurora, or Ta Aurora. And this picture shows where the islands are in the South Pacific, south of Hawaii. The story, which I am summarizing, says that Ta Aurora lives in an egg that revolves eternally in dark, empty space. When he breaks out of the egg, he creates the universe, making man and woman out of dirt from the earth. Te and his wife Helena. These two are very similar to Sapling and Flint in that Helena is good and Te likes to see people suffer. Te curses mankind with fear while Helena gives hope, just like the Greeks' Pandora's box with hope at the bottom. In the rest of the story, Te dies and Helena is triumphant, just like the Iroquois story with Sapling and Flint. That story is from North America, and this is from Tahiti, which Blavatsky teaches was once long ago a part of the same continent. Several creation stories have the depiction of heaven and earth being joined together, so people have to separate them. The Snohomish Native Americans near Seattle, where I live, and we have a city named Snohomish, say that at first the sky was so close that the people had to bend over to walk. If they stood up straight, they hit their heads on the sky. So all the tribes worked together using poles made from trees to push up the sky. The Maori tribe in New Zealand also has a story where the heavens and the earth need to be separated. And it starts with Te Kore, the nothingness. With no manifestation, it is Te Po, the night of darkness, as shown in the slide, who is immensely dark and long. Then the sun, the moon, and the earth are made, along with the children who still live in darkness, for their parents are not yet parted. The sky father Rangi lies upon Mother Earth Papi. No light nor time has come between them, and the children can neither escape nor see the light. So the children each try to force Rangi and Papi apart, but they all fail. And they ask the guardian of war to cut the sinews which bind them together. This makes them bleed and causes the earth to turn red, the sacred color, but it doesn't force them apart. The children discuss this and say, should we kill our parents so they may be separated? So here's another killing of the unmanifested. Finally, the fiercest of the children, Tane, steps forward, and very slowly he presses his shoulders against the sky, so gradually, as the kauri tree grows, because time is vast, the pressure makes the earth and sky yield. The strength of growth will not be stopped. Rangi, the sky, cries as he is separated from Papi and brings about rain, making the earth fertile. Then 4 poles are placed to hold up the sky. And then the children of the earth who have never known light can arise and flourish. The 4 poles again symbolizing the 4 elements and the 4 cardinal points. The Egyptian story of manifestation also has several versions depending on the locations where the myths are passed on, such as Memphis, and that's the top arrow, and Heliopolis is just north of it, or Thebes in the bottom arrow, which is more south. And the gods may even have different names from these areas, making it really confusing. One story describes Kanef, the eternal god of darkness, and is depicted as a snake encircling an egg or a water urn. The snake's head is over the water and his breath incubates it. So you can hear the waters of creation again, as well as the breath, which is very similar to the one breath of Hinduism, the breath of which we all are a part. In other locations, the god is Nehebkau, the primordial serpent god, who is a snake or dragon depicting the beginning of manifestation in the waters of noon. So you'll see this same snake in other stories. When the time is right for manifestation, the creative potential of the world, Atum, creates himself, and it's written that he allows himself to come into being. And this is the center of the white circle. From him comes Ra, the sun god, who is the creator god, but at a lower level of manifestation than Atum. And Ra is the king of the deities. And he corresponds with other gods in various mythologies, like Zeus of the Greeks. So Ra, the sun god, has the sun on his head inside of a cobra, and he looks very similar to Horus, for those of you that are familiar with Egyptian mythology. But Horus is further down in manifestation, being a sun king, or the god of kingship. Horus has the same head of a falcon, symbolizing royalty, but his crown is the crown of Egypt on his head instead of the sun. From Ra is created the air god Shu and his sister Tefnut, who create the empty space in the waters of noon. So these two start duality, and they're brother and sister, and they make room in the waters for creation. Shu and Tefnut become the parents of the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. Because Geb and Nut remain closely united in a perfect embrace, just like New Zealand's Papi and Rangi, they too need to be separated. So Shu, the god of air, lifts up Nut, the sky goddess. And so you can see Shu's arms holding up Nut as Geb, the earth god, lies beneath. So again, this duality and the start of the separation of the genders. So in these pictures, the blue stars of the sky goddess Nut's body are easy to see. And the story says that Geb cries over his loss of Nut, and his tears bring about vegetation and living creatures on earth. Nut gives birth to 4 children, Osiris and Isis, and Set and Nephthys. And then the twins, Osiris and Isis, are the royal androgyne before the separation of the sexes. Osiris takes his sister Isis as his wife and has a child, Horus. The statue on the left is Isis breastfeeding Horus, and together they make more of humanity. Osiris is killed by a sibling, Set. And in the picture on the right, Set is the god of war, and he's killing the serpent in a battle for kingship, which symbolizes again the killing of the unmanifested as life evolves on the physical plane. Similar imagery is in the Babylonian and Assyrian epic called Enuma Elish from the 7 tablets of creation, and these are in the British Museum. Absu, the god of the underwater seas, is the sweet water sea, and his co-creator is Tiamat, the goddess of the salt sea waters and the dragon creator. They create many gods between them. And Tiamat becomes bothered by all the noise and laughter of her godsons and grandsons. So Absu decides to destroy them so they can have some peace. Some stories say that Apsu was worried that its offspring were planning to kill him and take over the throne. So here again, you have the killing of the higher gods. So Apsu plans to kill his offspring. This plot is overheard by Apsu's and Tiamat's grandson, Ea, the All-Wise. And this picture shows Ea's sword in the current video game modeled after the Enuma Elish. And the sword has Ea's power. So Ea is called the All-Wise, and it corresponds with Mahat, the theosophical term for the universal mind. So Ea kills Apsu, the grandfather and god of the seas, and takes a wife and creates the furious warrior Marduk. And you can see how this story could have many adventures in them, and I'm not going to share them except this basic thread. So meanwhile, in Tiamat's waters, she makes fierce dragons filled with poison, along with monsters that battle the fairer gods. So here's the good and evil. So Ea commands his son Marduk to slay Tiamat. After a fierce battle, Marduk shoots an arrow into Tiamat, killing her and cutting her in half. One half of Tiamat becomes the heavens, and the other half becomes the earth. So here again, the god's body making the earth. Tiamat's weeping eyes become the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, making the earth fertile. Then Marduk goes on to create human beings. The Hindu creation stories has many versions and offshoots. So to summarize it, there is first the primordial waters in the bosom of the supreme god Vishnu. So you can see Vishnu is poised on the lotus leaf in the waters, and he is having Lakshmi, his consort, massage his feet. And she's the preserver of the world, and she's known for good luck. And you can see Brahma, the creator god, coming out of Vishnu's navel. And Brahma is further down in manifestation from Vishnu. Brahma creates a woman, Sarasvati, to aid him in his job of creation. So she's the Shakti, or the creative energy for manifestation, or Fohat in theosophical terms. In the story, Sarasvati is so beautiful that Brahma becomes infatuated with her and gazes at her wherever she goes. Sarasvati is embarrassed being his daughter and declines his advances, and she turns away from Brahma's gaze, but everywhere she moves, Brahma sprouts another head until he has 4. And this represents the 4 elements as well as the 4 Vedas, the ancient Hindu texts. To get away, Sarasvati changes her form and becomes every creature on earth. Meanwhile, Lord Shiva is angry at Brahma, and as punishment gives the curse that all the creatures on the earth will not know Brahman, the infinite divine or God. So this is seen in our lives with our preoccupation with earth life and ourselves, where we don't remember the divine in all things and people. As a form of repentance, Brahma has been reciting the 4 Vedas, one from each head, since that time. Brahma and Sarasvati are the parents of Manu, the first man. Now he's in the boat in the back, along with the 7 sages, and they have meaning with the 7, and they're being saved by the fish avatar behind them all, and he's one of the incarnations of Vishnu. Then Manu marries Sarasvati, his mother, and creates the rest of the human race. This is kind of similar to Isis marrying her brother Osiris. So this is the duality again. So moving to China, in the beginning, there was only an egg-shaped chaos called no thing. From this, the earth and the sky are created, and the yolk of the egg, which is yin, becomes the earth, and the egg white, yang, becomes the sky. And Fondue is born from this egg. And he has 2 horns and 2 tusks, symbolizing duality. The giant Fondue, becomes bigger and bigger for 18,000 years and pushes up the sky from the earth. Then he sets the sun, moon, stars, and planets into place. Ku creates the goddess Nua, who is a coiled serpent with the head of a goddess. So you can see the snake again, the serpent. Ku creates a god for Nua, so she can have someone to talk to. And this is her brother Fushi. So here's the duality, and you can see the intertwined tails. And this is also shown in the Astana graves and where in the pictures where both are coiled serpent. Nua goes to the Yellow River and out of the earth sculpts a human being. And she breathes life into it, like God making Adam. And she makes several more. And she realized that she can make them faster by putting a stick in the earth and shaking it off. And this creates all the people of the land. But it is said that the most intelligent beings are shaped by Nua's own hands. The Icelandic and Norse creation story is also extremely involved. So in summary, out of nothingness comes the northern land of Niflheim, of freezing fog, snow, and ice. Out of the south comes Muspel, which is fiery hot with rivers full of poison. So here the duality. The warm air from Muspel blows and melts the ice of Niflheim. Out of the ice comes the giant Ymir the roarer, and he's hungry and thirsty. So he roars, and out of the ice comes a cow, a Dumla. By the way, another version of this myth has Ymir sleeping, and from under his arm exudes a Dumla, the cow, similar to Eve coming from Adam's rib. And that's the budding, the first root race that Blavatsky teaches us. Ymir drinks a Dumla's milk and is satisfied. A Dumla's warm breath causes another shape to emerge called Buri, the first king of heaven, who with his female Besla begets Bor. Bor goes on to have 3 sons, or a trinity, and the first god is Odin, the mightiest god of all. As I said, many stories are about these gods, and you can see the progression into physical manifestation. Odin, with the help of his brothers, kills his father, the evil giant Ymir. So here's the killing of the unmanifested. To make people, the story is really creative in that Odin finds an ash and an elm tree which have fallen down, and he breathes life into them, and they are called Ask and Embla. Out of these come the entire human race. The heart of the Norse universe is an enormous ash tree called the Yggdrasil tree, and is composed of, at the top, Asgard, the home of the gods, or heaven, and then the middle is our earth, Midgard, and then Niflheim is the underworld. So this ends the summarized Norse legend, but to show you another tree of life, I'd like to share with you the Mayan tree of life, and that's from southern Mexico and northern Central America. And then 4,000 years later, the Aztecs have a similar creation story, and their creator god is Ometeotl in the dark, watery void. And I'm only going to show you the gods here so you can see the similarity. He brings forth Sapakli, the dragon serpent, whose body is used to create the earth. From there comes the two gods, and I'm not going to pronounce their names, who are husband and wife, and that's duality. And one of which is the feathered god, Quetzalcoatl, the god of life, light, who brings forth further manifestation. Greek mythology has an exquisite story of how human beings are given their self-awareness. This is in the third root race or wave of humanity. Blavatsky teaches us that divine angelic beings called Manasaputras incarnate into humans to give us our intellect. As other myths, the Greek story begins with a dark nothingness, then out of light comes Uranus, the sky god, who pairs with Gaia, the earth goddess, who gives birth to Zeus, the king of the gods. And he's supposed to create the creatures of the earth. And he gives that job to his two sons, Prometheus and Epimetheus. So you can see the various levels of manifestation here of these gods. Prometheus is to create human beings, and Epimetheus will create animals. So Epimetheus gives each creature a gift, such as the speed and agility of the gazelles, but he makes a mistake and uses up all the gifts. So Prometheus doesn't have one to give the human beings. However, Prometheus knows that in order for humans to survive, they need intelligence. So to accomplish this, since there are no gifts left, he decides to capture the spark of the sacred fire from Zeus on Mount Olympus. He succeeds, but Zeus is furious and sentenced Prometheus to eternal torment by being chained to a rock where each day an eagle, the emblem of Zeus, eats Prometheus's liver, which grows back overnight to be eaten once again the next day. And in the story, Prometheus is saved by the hero Heracles. Getting sacred fire, or our minds, is also depicted in the Christian story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And I'm just going to summarize it, but you've seen how God makes Eve from Adam's rib, and God tells both of them, you may eat from every tree except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And now that's a duality. For if you eat of it, God says, you shall die. So in the garden, the serpent tempts Eve with the forbidden fruit, but he promises her that if she and Adam eat of it, they will not die, but be immortal, meaning they have immortality in them in their higher self. And Adam and Eve create the rest of humanity. So in closing, I'd like to share some beautiful lines from the poetic story of Karahan from Turkey and Mongolia. The wording is so expressive and insightful. It speaks of endless waters reaching the four corners of nothingness. So here's the four again. In silence flies the gander, the god Karahan. And the gander flies without stopping or resting. And this is the eternal motion of the one life that Blavatsky writes about. As manifestation begins, Karahan trembles in his flight. This churns up the water so that it swells and folds upon itself darkly. Will time come to free him from his flight? As creation begins, the waters shiver and time trembles, and water and time crush emptiness between them. And I just think this is so poetic. Then there are two geese flying in the joy of endless being. The story continues with the second goose, Erkishi, plummeting down into the waters with deadly time trapped in his feathers. As he tries to soar back up, Karahan takes the flight from his wings. As rock and land are formed, the poem says, eternity sucks water down to give earth room. And the epic continues with all of creation, and you can hear the beauty in the words. So in summary, you can see how Blavatsky's palm leaf manuscript corresponds with the great nothingness and the endless waters. Then comes the start of creation with the light. Next, we have duality. And finally, human beings are given their minds. So our challenge is to continue to move forward with evolution and progress to becoming the spiritual beings we started out from. Thank you.